Welcome back to Two Dumb White Men. Um, Recently, amid the coronavirus, there's been outbreaks of the Black Plague, Yersinia pestis, right? And although it sounds really scary, what's actually interesting about Yersinia pestis, the Black Plague, bubonic plague, whatever you want to call it, is it's actually been around since we stopped dealing with it. We've had the medication, so it's nowhere near as big of a deal as corona is, but it's also been around. So it stays in fleas, and it usually lives in like prairie dogs and other small burrowing rodents like that. So there's areas of the Southwest United States even they have them closed off, where like don't go in here. The fleas have the plague. They have signs posted all over, and so that's a thing that's researched. I think people are over worrying about that one, but it's still interesting to think about just general pandemics. Like we had the pandemic in like 1918, I think, and there's some cool older articles coming out about how people didn't wear masks then, and how people, humans haven't really changed too much, even in times of strife, I guess.
That's interesting. I didn't even know the Black Plague was around. I didn't even know that was a thing. Is it like a bacterial infection? Can it be stopped by antibiotics?
I'm trying to remember exactly. I don't want to, go off the top of my head, but I believe it is a bacterial species. It's Yersinia pestis. Let's Google it real quick, just so we can be certain. But I know it has it's a bacteria, so it's going to work with antibiotics.
Okay, so it wouldn't be too bad if you got it, right?
Yeah, we already have all the antibiotics we need for that one. So it's nowhere near as big of a deal. Coronavirus is definitely much bigger because A, it's a virus. Antibiotics do not work on viruses. And B, we don't have an active working ingredient for it yet. Like even the flu is hard. That's also a kind of coronavirus. So
Right.
is the common cold. And we don't really have a consistent... We always have to update the flu vaccine every year.
Right, yeah. For me, I always have a hard time understanding is like malaria is a virus, right?
I believe so.
But it stays with you forever, right? Unlike these things, which seem to pass within a set amount of time. Like I know, for example, AIDS is a virus as well, but that just seems to stay indefinitely in the system.
So malaria, it's kind of plasmodium. It's a parasite.
Oh, it's a parasite.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know malaria is like the hardest one. It's hard to even get diagnosed with it because you have to have a fever above 100 degrees for it to show up or something around that like area.
Right.
And you're just like fucked the rest of your life if you get it.
What's really interesting, and I know other people have talked about this, I don't know if you know about it, but a lot of people in Africa have sickle cell syndrome, which is where their blood cells are sickle shaped instead of standard like oblong kind of shape like that, which means they just generally carry less heme per cell. And that actually, what would traditionally be a bad thing, traditionally that means you get less oxygen going to your brain and to your heart more consistently. It actually helps in malaria's case because the plasmodium doesn't recognize that it can reproduce in those blood cells. So those that are actually, I think it's if you are recessive for sickle cell, you are more immune to malaria just biologically because the malarial parasite doesn't recognize it as a place it can reproduce.
Okay, interesting. It's also interesting too. I heard some people, we won't go very vocal about this, but we're actually pretty big advocates for DDT during the time towards spraying towards Africa, just to like get rid that like a crop. What are those called? Crop dusters.
Yeah,
just spray them along the mosquito population just to reduce it, and they would see the effects of it. Compared, like the result of life that would not be lost if malaria got wiped out in those areas versus the species that will be killed. Looking at it from an egalitarian perspective would be worth it.
Right.
But that argument's long gone. DDT is like long been eradicated. I think it was very effective though as a pesticide.
It was horribly effective. Was the problem. So I mean, I'm an entomologist. I do know a good bit about this. I've had several classes where we discuss it. DDT, like you're saying, was a very good pesticide. It was so good that it killed everything it was not trying to kill, as well as killing what it had a lot of non-target effects, was its problem. There's also the issue of bioaccumulation with DDT, since it didn't dissipate, it didn't half-life soon enough within the environment for it to dissipate. So what happened was you'd get the DDT in the insect, the insect would then get eaten by the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and then the thing people like to talk about with DDT is that it made bald eagle eggshells get thinner because there's just so much buildup of all this shit going on in it. set, it kind of chemically ruined whatever the highest stratosphere of carnivore was. So obviously a predatory bird is pretty high up in the food chain in that system. So
but would it kill the eagle, or would it just make the bird show, or the egg would die then, right?
Right, yeah. The shell would be way, way less structurally integral, which means it could easily crack open and it can kill the bird before. And it's kind of depressing in a way that it took us to realize the national bird is dying before we decided to get rid of this thing.
Right. I'm surprised they didn't do like any clinical trials. I'm sure
this was way back in the day.
Yeah. Like where they would just like give it to animals and see if they died or not.
Well, it also took a while because it was bioaccumulation. It wasn't just because the thing was you could spray DDT on a human, and they used to do that. There used to be fog machines or like fog trucks that go at night. They just spray DDT, and kids used to ride their bikes behind it because they thought it was fun.
Now, long term, are there people who have been like suffering?
It could be
like I feel like it could cause cancer or something.
It probably does. Yeah, there's a lot of things probably. Our parents' generation grew up with that they had no idea that could be possibly chemical or cancer-causing agents in the future.
Yeah,
but I'm certain that's one. But DDT really got taken away because of that. Because every time you go up to the next stratosphere of the food chain with DDT, it didn't go away. It didn't cut in half. It got more and more and more. It's the same thing with mercury levels in polar bears. That doesn't go away. So the polar bears have really high levels of mercury through all the food that they're eating.
Right. Yeah. So if it actually killed off, like for me, the only argument we were told in school was like the eggshells.
Yeah.
So looking at that, I'd be like, well, if that animal dies, basically, would eradicate malaria. But what you're saying it would do a lot more harm that we don't.
It would do a lot more harm. But it also brings up the question of as an entomologist, as someone that has worked on mosquitoes, black flies, and ticks. I work on a lot of arthropods that transmit disease. People ask the question a lot of, what do mosquitoes do? Can we just kill them all? And to answer the first one, they pollinate. They do that. They're also good food sources for a lot of things, both aerial and aquatic.
Let's give a couple examples. What eats the mosquito? So
outside in the terrestrial environment with their adult form, bats. Bats are the number one predator of them.
Yeah, okay.
And because bats come out in the evening time, mosquitoes come out in the evening time, they echolocate. So you have bats going on. You also have some birds. When they are larval, when they're in the water, tadpoles eat them, small fish eat them. There's even a species called the mosquito fish commonly, which doesn't eat anywhere near as many mosquitoes as other species do, but also they're there. And you also get larger mosquito species that will eat other mosquito species larvae. It's really cool. That one is called Toxorynchides. Very fun name. No common name. Only the scientific name on that one. It's very big. It has teeth. It has jaws, while the other ones just have suctioning mouth parts. So there are a lot of food sources, but they also pollinate different plants because all insects need a sugar source and they need a protein source. So most of them, it's going to be the nectar and the pollen from the plant. Mosquitoes really just need the nectar though, because the females get the protein from the blood. Males don't suck blood; they get it from the pollen. So the males do pollinate plants. A lot of flies pollinate plants.
So in short, you can't really, there'll be bad effects of eradication.
Right, yeah, you're losing a little bit of the food chain, and you're also losing some of your pollinators, especially for plants you might not think of. Like a lot of native plants are going to be pollinated. It might not be your food crop, but it might be, the small berry-style plant that we don't eat that other birds eat, or something similar to that. So eradicating any insect is dangerous. There's also the fact that it's just not probable. I don't think it's physically possible to eradicate only the mosquitoes, because you can either go with the route that we're doing now, which is probably the best route, which is genetically modifying them and doing the sterile male technique, which is where you make sterile males. They go into the environment, they compete with the other males, they mate, but then the eggs from that next generation do not hatch because they don't have the gene in them that lets them reproduce, pretty much. So that next generation dies.
Oh, okay. Now, would that be a violation of the Geneva Convention, messing with the rights of mosquitoes?
No, of course not. No, but that's another interesting point to bring up is, when you're dealing with mammals, there's so many regulations, but you're dealing with arthropods, people don't really care as much unless it's directly beneficial, like honeybees. They care a lot about those. The what are they called? Oh my god, I'm trying to think of the name. Horseshoe crabs. Their blood is incredibly useful. So
really?
Yeah, I forgot exactly what it does, but it's blue blood and it has a very high copper percentage, and people take them and they bleed them out to get their blood. So they'll keep farms of horseshoe crabs because it's some pharmaceutical thing. I don't remember exactly, but I know it goes into a very important medical issue.
Now, one could make an argument if we were back in the day and I asked you about the dodo and you gave me all these reasons why the dodo is good, and yet we wiped them out. And here we are standing.
Right.
How would you counter that argument?
The dodo, I don't know that much about, honestly.
Well, I'm sure they had some environment they had some impact. There was some impact in wiping them out on the ecosystem.
Right.
Yet it still remains.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I mean, and that's a good thing to bring up, though, is that a lot of people, there's a lot of counter arguments on both sides. Mm-hmm. I think it's just not really possible.
Okay. Yeah.
Is my take on it, is like, how are you going to specifically only kill them? You have to go with just the larva, but then you are targeting like all waterways, all fresh waterways, pretty much. And you might be killing other things you don't want to be killing. There's no hope in killing them when they're adults. You kind of just got to hope that they don't bite you at that point.
Right, okay.
So as far as that goes with pest control, it has to be larval. But if we're talking about something dies, there's people on the counterpoint that argue, well, if this thing dies, something else will just occupy its niche. And that's probably true. We already have other blood-sucking insects, but we might not have other blood-sucking insects that start aquatically similar to mosquitoes. We have black flies, which are the closest one, but they are not free-roaming. They kind of sit where they are. So maybe other black flies would evolve to be free-roaming and to do that. But they occupy pretty much the same niche, do a lot of the same stuff.
Let us take this thread of environmentalism. For me, I'm always a little bit skeptical when someone comes up. Your arguments to sound, but this falls on a documentary I recently saw on a very liberal activist called Michael Moore. It actually got panned by critics because it was very critical of green energy at the time. And basically, the documentary said all the efforts we're taking to help the environment are pretty much bullshit at this time. It went over these solar panel sites and stuff, and basically said they're not self-sufficient. They need tools to be built for them, requires gas. And they're actually, for them to power up, they rely on an electrical grid, which goes through like gas and whatnot. And I also talked about biofuel, which is actually just a rebranding that the gas companies use, which is actually just wood. And sometimes it's even trash that they just burn. And it's like a lot horrible. And all these forests are getting wiped out by it. And then he really made this. I was with him on Rocket. This is interesting, very cool stuff. But he, halfway towards the film, it wasn't him saying this, it was the narrator, but he produced it, I think. The narrator had this argument with this guy, and he was saying that once you come to understand that you're going to die, and that we must go on with the collective mindset, you are freed by this principle. And then he said, we're entering a new dawn and stuff, and he said we have to make radical changes. And basically, it didn't spell out say this, but the implication was eugenics. And we are, somehow, the human life is worth less than the survival of the earth. And, what kind of arguments would be made? This would be like, having some people not breed anymore, kind of like the one-child policy in China. Very, I think, insidious kind of campaigning. I did not like that at all. And in the end, it really got me because it showed, well, this is what's going to happen if we don't do it. And it showed like an orangutan on a tree, and it had like all this sad music. I'm like, all right, dude, just don't try to... All right, let's quit it with the pathos so heavily. But I feel like I get this thread from environmentalist types who are trying, who just like, kind of like, who are just way too fervent and active with it. And I don't feel like they want to like tear down everything. Like no gas, nothing like that. No nuclear, which is always a big problem because a lot of people think nuclear is good. The only big drawback is the fuel that's remained is still radioactive, and it will be for like a very long time. But it seems to be the only alternative at the moment. Solar and wind are both bad. They kill birds, and they aren't self-sufficient. But yeah, I guess that's where I'm at with the environmentalist kind of stuff. I don't know. Right. What would you like to think on that? I kind of threw a lot out there, but...
Yeah, so, I mean, as far as talking about just mosquitoes and other things like that, I try to separate it because it's discussing two separate things. One's discussing, the insects and animals and plants that live on the planet, and the other is discussing environmentalism from a strict human perspective, or strict human view. And I think those are two different answers. I don't really know the best course for us to go down. I think any kind of energy we're going to produce will probably have a negative impact at some point, whether we like it or not. It's all not going to be good for us or the Earth in general. I do agree we do need to protect the Earth, but I don't know at what point you decide to start sacrificing babies to do it. I'm very in favor of us trying to explore the different planets if possible. I recognize it'll be difficult to find a place that is the exact same as Earth, but and people always say that it's the final frontier. It's the next logical step for us as a species is to leave home and find somewhere else, since we know we don't know really what we're doing on this planet. And even our best guesses at creating renewable energy, like you said, they kill birds with the windmills and all that, they're still just best guesses. So I think we need to get out of here as fast as we can. And I think once we do that, we'll find something else somewhere else that will give us better answers to our questions we had at home.
Right. Yeah, and to be honest, they did take quite a leap there, because I just heard a little bit of environmentalism, and I just wanted to bring that topic up. So it isn't really what we were talking about. Also, another facet of this documentary I thought was interesting was that these big oil companies were really rebranding themselves as clean energy, but they were it's just the same thing. They're just remarketing it, and I thought that was kind of interesting.
I mean, that's just the way you got to work it when you're trying to make money.
Yeah, fucking Rockefeller was like one of the big, or was it Rockefeller? So one of those types of people were like the main fundraisers were like funding for like these types of people, and it looked real bad when they showed that. Because you have to disclose that information. Yeah, that's interesting. But we have come a long way. Like, if you think about DDT, I always think about like all the shit that went down that we really didn't really know what we were doing. Like, for example, the radium girls. Have you ever heard of those?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was bad with the whole radium type. And then we had those nuclear tests we did. I haven't read too much into it, but we did a lot of atomic testing in sites, and there was like a town nearby it. I can't remember whether, but I think the nuclear fallout caused a lot of people to have cancer and stuff, and they were told basically they would be fine. We also did a couple of sites with nuclear bombs with Marines, and they were like situated outside the blast, but they still had a whole lot of the fallout. At the time, they didn't really know about the radiation. That stuff's kind of scary, but we don't really play that way anymore. I'm saying that's like global superpower.
I mean, then also there's the easy topic of Chernobyl to discuss.
I don't know too much about Chernobyl, honestly. You can elucidate that.
It was basically, there was a nuclear reactor there, and someone did not do the proper amount of regulation on it. They didn't upkeep it as right, so one of the cores, I think, burst. Or
the fucking Soviets.
Something, because one guy didn't do like the right switch or something, and they just left it unchecked, and it kind of radiation everywhere because it just steeped out. Everyone left an abandoned town. People still go there because I think it's been however many years since then. So I think it's been a couple half-lives of the radiation dying, but it's still going to be a long time before we can live there. Like, people will go there in radiation suits and look around, and there's cool things where they show how the radiation is impacting biological life in the area. So there's more mutations happening because it messes with your DNA more. So they'll find two-headed frogs somewhat frequently in that area. They can still live there, they still exist, but their coding is getting a little mixed up.
That's interesting. So the way I heard about radiation is you always see in films that it augments the body, like deforms it, but usually it's just cancer.
Right.
Like, I guess if you birth with it. Did anyone die from that?
I'm not sure. I'm almost certain they did, but I don't have the numbers on that. But I do know that's a place that is still, people are still trying to study it because it is the best case study of long-term radiation exposure to biological entities. How much is it impacting the DNA of this species over this course of decades? Yeah,
I mean, radiation's not good at all. Everyone knows about that. Especially the gamma rays. The uranium has a very long half-life.
Yes.
Especially the waste. It's like the waste time. It's like, years.
Yeah, it's a long time. Chemistry is a very interesting topic I was never very good at, but half-life is a very cool concept,
Looking at it from a broad stroke, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, right. I mean, if you're looking at it strictly from the radiation area, it's kind of scary, but the concept of it all is very interesting, that's just how it works, I was never very good at chemistry, but it's one of those topics I've always wanted to kind of learn more about just passively and not be quizzed on, I guess.
Yeah, it's a cool topic. Like, it's interesting that X-rays are radiation, but I can't remember what type they are, but they don't like cause any like long. Actually, you aren't supposed to get too many X-rays, I believe, in one area because it's supposed to be damaging. But
that's why if you go to the hospital or whatever and they try to do an X-ray of you, the doctor will step out because he's like, I get exposed to this a lot. You know, if because you can get exposed to an X-ray a couple times, whatever, and it'll be fine. But the doctor who's around it all day, every day, giving X-rays, he can't be directly in it or near it because he will start getting the bad shit.
Right, on a daily basis.
Yes. If it's just high exposure to it constantly.
Yeah. There's some cool, interesting stories in chemistry, especially with the psychoactive stuff. Like, for example, they discovered quaaludes.
Oh God,
it was a whole barbiturate, and it was a big discovery for them because it was like a molecule that they can add a bunch of stuff to. And they didn't even know it was psychoactive, but during the party they had after it, some of the dogs ate it and they became very like sleepy. Mm-hmm. They observed this and realized they could make this whole class of drugs out of this compound. And then they like figured out after a long amount of time that people can easily die off of it.
Right.
And then they rebranded it into benzodiazepines, which are less abusable, harder to OD on, and it has less down-regulating the dopamine, so it gives you less of a euphoric feelings, more of a scientific medical use. It's a little bit better, but it still is heavily abused. Mm-hmm. And they came up with the Z drugs, which are like Ambien. But Ambien's been known, I don't know why they have the one still on the market, because everyone who takes it has like weird problems, like sleepwalking. They'll have like times where they have like a whole conversation with people and they just don't remember it. Like straight amnesia from your prescribed dose.
Yeah.
So stuff I find like that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I watched a video because I didn't know what quaaludes were. I think like 4 months ago, or whatever. I watched a video of a guy just yelling about how he wants them back. He's like, "Man, they were the best party drug ever. Bring back the quaaludes." It's a really funny video. We'll watch it later, but he's just like going on and off about it. And so I looked it up, and I didn't know there was a thing, you know.
Yeah,
but learning about it, you're like, whoa, shit.
They still have some medical usage, like they have like the ones that aren't as effective, and they'll still prescribe them. I think the heavy ones were phenobarbital and methaqualone, which they still use in veterinary practices.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is interesting.
Whenever I had my appendectomy, for just talking about general, things that do with your brain and chemicals, I was pretty much like dying on this tiny little seat thing in like the waiting room. So my stomach felt like it was getting stabbed from the inside a billion times a second. So I was crippled over in pain. But that was my first time ever on morphine, and it's incredible. That's an incredible drug, I will say.
Did you get like a lot of euphoria from it?
It was just immediate pain relief from something that had been literally stabbing my stomach for the past 4 days. Mm-hmm. It was like, wow, everything's good. I'm fine. I can go home now. I'm not in pain. But they're like, no, your appendix is about to burst. We have to go do surgery right now. And I was like, oh, okay, let's do that. But if I had been in pain, I would be like, crippled over, be like, yeah, please, whatever. But I was on morphine, so I was like, yeah, that sounds like okay. I could do that. I feel fine, And wow, if it gives you, I never got like a euphoria from it. Really, I just got the pain relief, but that was enough to make me happy. I know people abuse painkillers a lot, and I can see kind of why after having experienced the actual use of the drug.
Yeah, I know a couple writers around the 20s, because morphine was just given a lot back then.
Yeah.
And who just got addicted to it just because they had surgery and they loved it so much.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's more addicted to the people who are very despondent or lacking something in life, usually like depression, and they find the instant relief from it. And that's unfortunately one of the big side effects of opiates, because they're the only real pain reliever out there that can just stop your receptors screaming out.
Right.
They're very effective at that, but most of them, you just get a lot of addiction with it, especially Oxycontin, which is actually the same strength as heroin. It's 10 times morphine. And I've actually heard heroin addicts say, like, hey, if you had X amount of more heroin or oxycodone in front of you, which one would you take? They would prefer the oxycodone.
Wow.
Because you don't know what's in it, and it's considered like a little bit more euphoria, which is just kind of crazy if you think about it. Another interesting one is PCP, which is actually introduced as an anesthetic, where people would complain of incredible visual hallucinations and stuff, so they stopped doing it.
I didn't know it was brought forth as an anesthetic. That's interesting. Imagine you go to the dentist and the dude's like, it's coming in, scraping your teeth. It's like a demon, literally, with like its claws going into your gums. Oh, that would be awful.
And that's one of the few drugs that actually cause lesions in your brain. So they're little black spots.
From overusage?
Just recreational use.
Wow.
That hit the streets in the 70s. I don't know what caused the surge in it. But yeah, a lot of people. It also causes this weird phenomenon where it also completely blocks pain. So much so you could get shot, your arm cut off, and still be completely functional.
Damn.
So you had a lot of these police cases where these guys would be intoxicated PCP, and they would leave me like 5 people to take him out. Because they would just be in a rage. And there have been a lot of cases too, like I remember a rapper was on it, and he ate his wife She said she thought she was the devil. So that just sounds so insane.
That kind of ties to another one that I heard. So there was this, I think it's an MMA fighter. I don't remember his name. We could probably Google it later.
Oh, is this the guy who took the mushrooms?
Yeah, he ate a fly agaric, which are the Mario mushrooms.
Dissociative, yeah.
Yeah, he ate the Mario mushrooms. They're bright red, white warts on them. Basically, it can give you, it's known for giving you a good high, but also a really bad high. It's like guaranteed a bad high every time. But he took it anyway. He ripped his friend's heart out because he thought he was a demon. And so some of these things are dangerous.
Yeah, that's also the legal one, which is weird. Psilocybin are illegal.
But psilocybin's different from agarics.
Yeah, I'm saying that you could buy that one like on the internet.
Yeah.
You can't buy psilocybin.
You can grow your own psilocybin mushrooms. There's one that grows in cow pastures down in the south, down here. I think they're called like American Rockets or something.
Yeah, I think they put feed in them now, though, to discourage
they
people
do.
going out.
They do, because they don't want that. They don't want people coming onto their lots and trying to steal stuff out of their cow's shit, Like literal shit. It grows in the cow patty because it's symbiotic with their guts.
Yeah, that's crazy. I can't believe you did that. Psychedelics are a whole different topic, too, because we don't really understand how they work.
Oh, yeah.
And they got banned right in the 1970s, so they saw about 10 years of use. When they first started up, it was psychiatrists who really into them. They're like, well, it's just unlocking parts of the brain we don't know about. Then it got caught up with the hippies, and then it started being a street thing, the party drug. And then, you had some cases where people got killed on it, and then it got demonized by the mass media, and then poof. And then we're not allowed to continue any actual studies on it, which kind of sucks. At least we can't do it in a clinical trial.
I've seen some videos online where a guy, he has some kind of I think it's what is it? It's where you move constantly. Is it Parkinson's? I think.
Yeah.
So I think he had Parkinson's, and microdosing of psilocybin mushrooms actually helps calm him completely. He can work. But he has to grow it himself because no one else. He can't. You could buy it as the from drug dealers, I guess, and he can't buy it medically, so he has to grow them himself, pretty much illegally. But he's like, this is the only way I can live a normal life with horrible Parkinson's and arthritis all the time.
Yeah, and to be honest, for me, honestly, I would be skeptical because I hear a lot about weed too. I feel like for me, I would have to see clinical trials. Anecdotal doesn't agree, but we can't do clinical on it, so we don't know.
Right.
Then to be honest, really what got marijuana really popular, I think during our generation, we saw it it can cure, it's a panacea. It can cure cancer, it can cure Crohn's disease, it can cure this and that, and all this just anecdotal shit starts coming out of the woodwork.
Snake oil kind of.
Yeah, and it's really, it's good for you. Just smoke it all the time. Mm-hmm. Not really a drug. You've heard that argument before. Oh, it's not a drug.
Oh, yeah, and it got legalized first for medical use.
Right.
It didn't get legalized for recreational party usage. Yeah.
And that's, I don't know, for me, that's just kind of bullshit. We're going to see the kickback from that, I feel like.
Right.
I think a lot of my generation smokes consistently, and there are some down effects with that.
Agreed.
Usually, memory loss is just a big thing with it.
Yeah. With that microdosing of psilocybin, or even smoking weed,
that's weird because you don't even get a psychoactive dose from it.
Right.
You would just take a very small amount.
Exactly.
Which is hard to do because you actually need the actual compound psilocybin because he's taking it from mushrooms, and that has a different amount each time, so you don't really know. Mm-hmm. So that would be kind of hard.
Well, I agree that because it is an anecdotal thing, and if it works for him, good for him.
Yeah.
We I guess it works for him, but I agree. We should. In some way, at least legalize them for scientific usage. And I'm certain something like the military, I'm almost certain they're still doing shit with it. Like the big industrial compounds, where they don't tell us any of the science they're doing behind the scenes. Almost certain stuff is still being done with psilocybin mushrooms there. But I'd like to see it as a publicly available record, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't think it's... I think as long as everyone understands what's happening in the study, because that was a problem back in the days. It was blind. It was double blind. They would not tell them anything.
Yeah, they would give it to mental ward patients.
Yeah, and that's the worst person. What you should do is give it to people that decide that they do want to sign up for this. They're in good mental health, and they agree to the study. And then from there, since everyone's in the know, it's much easier to get good data. If you're just giving it to mentally ill people that have no idea,
you can't effectively tell them what's going on.
They can't tell you what's happening, and you can't understand why they're being, because who knows what all's happening,
Yeah.
It's something that we need a very controlled environment for. I think we kind of cornered ourselves into not being able to do that anymore.
Yeah, it was really a media purge kind of. It's one of those usually when the media gets on something, a scare happens. It's more than the thing. Like, for example, the satanic cult phenomenon.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I remember reading that no actual evidence of satanic cult ritual abuse, is what they call it, has ever been found, and a couple people convicted of it. And those cases got overturned later, but it was just all media hype, which is crazy. It was such like a big thing permeating the 80s. And this fucking weird thing with Dungeons and Dragons where they seem to think it was causing people to be lost in fantasy and like do evil things. Like
and Harry Potter and Pokemon. Remember those? So witchcraft and like
I didn't hear that being attributed to Pokemon or Harry Potter.
Yeah, well,
that's crazy.
Yeah, they're a little bit different. So like Harry Potter was obviously just this is blatant witchcraft kind of thing, and it was tying back into the whole Satanist, Wiccan kind of thing. Like, oh, we're scared. Us Christian moms don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
But Pokemon was evolution, and they were not.
Oh my God.
They were not okay with the concept of something evolving, even though it's a fictional piece, very highly cartoony, for children. They were still like, this is teaching children evolution, and I don't like that. They took issue with calling it this Pokemon evolved was the thing. So that was an interesting controversy. Having grown up with Pokemon and still liking it now, it seems like such an innocent thing.
Yeah,
but back in the day, it was demonized by a lot of people.
Yeah, I think in the 80s you had a big uptick of the Christian people seeming to have control of the public stage.
Right.
So you had a lot of people, and that was the polar opposite. So, I mean, you get give or take either way. But I mean, most of them I don't think get good attention. You have a lot of them trying to censor records during the time.
Mm-hmm.
You had the first thing of the parental advisory being stuck on stuff. And that was all really moms, like really considered mothers who said, hey, children shouldn't listen to this. And rather as having the parents, control what their kids are listening to, it was like, stores should be the ones in charge of this, which I thought was an interesting debate.
Yeah, whenever you're talking about like the Satanist hype going on and stuff, it actually, especially in like the 90s, where you go to the early 90s with like Marilyn Manson and stuff like that, he was a big one that mothers and teachers and all that, they like to specifically target him. So I've watched like a documentary, I think, or like a short one on YouTube or whatever, where he's talking about his experience of that. Now he's had to go to court before several times because people are like, you made my son do this thing because of this lyric in your song or this music video. And he's like, look, I'm an artist. I'm performing. This is a song. Like, it's your fault that you're not raising your child. Like, this is, I'm not dictating their life, and I feel kind of bad for the amount of controversy that man had to go through. And he kind of had to prematurely end some of his career. He had to stop for like 10 years or so there because he's like, I'm just getting sued like constantly. So he kind of stepped away. But it's interesting because you look back, even like Black Sabbath way earlier, they literally have songs where they say Satan is there, like I love Satan or whatever. And like, I assume they had their own controversies going on, but I wonder.
I think they did too. They had a couple of suicide songs, I think. And
they
had no trouble with that.
I mean, but I guess Manson was just very, very flamboyant with his showings of it. Also, they had MTV was a thing back in the day, so it was very easy to watch and see the symbols in his videos and the things he was doing, as opposed to Sabbath, you just hear the music.
Yeah.
You might see him in person, but they were a little occulty, but not that bad. Nowhere near the level that Manson is of just.
He's scary, dude. I never like his music videos. He's weird, dude.
And a lot of people were scared of him back in the day. But there's other people, like I think Rob Zombie had some weird stuff, like all those horror kind of shock, like Slipknot's another one. They get tied into that where they're just like, it's supposed to be scary. That's the point of the music. It's supposed to be scary and mysterious, but they're like, no, it's demonic. Not really, but whatever, man. You take it however you want.
Yeah, it's like when Clockwork Orange came out, there were a couple kids who went up and did the same thing in the movie. And my main argument like that was like, what, they were going to go to like a potluck if they didn't watch that movie? Like, I feel like those kids were going to do something either way. And that was
right.
And I mean, it really goes down to the parent. And do you remember Grand Theft Auto San Andreas?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that game was pretty hardcore, though. You literally do gang shit. You just go by and do drive-bys and shit. But still, I mean, it's like, it's not, I mean, it shouldn't be censored, It shouldn't be taken off the shelves because of that.
So that actually brings up a kind of interesting point. So you and I have a little bit separate, we talked about this last night, how we, as far as religion is concerned, we have a little bit different in our upbringing. You were definitely raised Catholic, and you were still Catholic, correct? Yeah. So
I had a falling out when I was 14.
Right.
Up until like 24, I went back in.
But you have a background of Catholicism and being in a religion consistently. I do not. I was in Sunday school until I was like 8. and we stopped going. So I didn't really grow up with a religion, and my mother is much more kind of Wiccan leaning. So I get a lot of different witch like kind of. She's okay with the natural, other different kinds of religions and ideas.
Natural what, like pantheism, like seeing God in nature.
Well, I mean, she doesn't like devoutly go about those things, but she has more of a questioning nature of it, and is more believing of, I guess, nature itself and whatever old pagan gods. Or anyway, it brings up an interesting point though, because my parents are both into that kind of music growing up, and they were both into like Black Sabbath. So they, long before they had children, were not going to oppress me for listening to this kind of stuff or liking Slipknot or liking whoever. They let me play shooter games with violence and stuff because they're like, it's okay, it's fine. So, and I know your parents were not, that strict either with like these strict Christian mothers, but you have a lot more experience with people that did have those kinds of parents. And what were your takeaways from people having very strict religious parents trying to stop them from enjoying things?
Let's see. I mean, to be honest, most of them didn't really. For me, shooter stuff, it was a while before I was allowed to play just because they're very violent, and that was kind of understandable. Just because it would create more of an effect, I think, on a child. Playing a game like not Halo's not a good example because it's so fantasy-like, but I'm trying to think of the old school shooters back then, something like Diablo or whatnot, where you had a shitload of gore, just because you can't be a child really, and you have to understand, you have to separate that from reality. And that was really the main angle to come out. For stuff like Black Sabbath, they didn't really care for that I listened to them because to be honest, I didn't believe what they said. I just liked it on an artistic standpoint. I liked the music. There was like one example I think of one mom who was in our school who wouldn't let her kid watch The Patriot in middle school, and we all were able to watch it just because she thought it was kind of bad. I don't know, Mel Gibson or something. But to be honest, no, I didn't really have any of those heavy-duty religious types. That seems kind of stupid to me. To be honest, though, let's see. My teaching of the Christian doctrine, I think, was pretty much flawed. When I went to that school, we were taught facts. We were taught everything in the Bible as fact. We just had to memorize the facts about it. And that's really the worst way to understand it. For example,
it's almost like a history class.
Yeah. And if you look at it from that standpoint, it's like, what the fuck? This is all just a bunch of weird bullshit. You just remember that someone turned to a pillar of salt. You got to remember the date. Rather than you got to remember it's like a metaphor. For example, one thing in the New Testament, people were divvying up lots for the new kingdom. This is after Jesus left and came back in. And two family hold on to a bit of their land. They don't tell anyone about it. And when they go back in the temple, they're struck down dead. Now, if you interpret that from a factual standpoint, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Like, oh, you got to give everything up to God. It's more like if you try to hold on to something metaphorically that you don't reveal to God, you will not be removed in contact with Him. You don't take it from a you'll be struck dead kind of perspective. You got to metaphorize. I don't even know if that's a word into it and see where that's coming from and what it's trying to teach you, rather than a factual standpoint. That kind of throws you away. And we were talking too. I was interested that really you have to kind of learn a lot of this stuff through your own instinct and kind of wander through the darkness for a while, and then to understand the depth to what these arguments are, rather than being taught it as a child and then being just taught that you have to do it. Because that's really breeding a lot of people going out of it. Because you get the adolescence, you want to rebel towards everything, and obviously religion will be the first one to go. And then you don't even understand what you're missing once you leave that, rather than it always being there and just an undiscovered medium. That could be opposite to this culture right now to be anti-religion just in general. Or atheism. Right. How many of your friends are atheists?
Atheist?
Or agnostic, or just don't have an opinion either way?
A lot of them are definitely agnostic. I don't have many that are very, I hate active religion, or I hate God, or whatever. It's mostly, from what I can tell, either Christian with mild, dedication, or agnostic usually. I'm agnostic because I wasn't really raised Christian, I guess, but I was raised to think about these other ideas and religions and ways of life. So, to me, it's strange to assume something, but that's not saying I bash anyone that does believe these things.
No, it's clearly not.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, most people are generally agnostic that I know, my friends.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I don't want to harp because, it's either way, but I feel like, when you have, like I said to you, when you have true suffering, you have a conscious contact. I think, try to look forward and transpose this medium of reality and like to something greater, something higher
Mm-hmm.
in our faculties. And I feel like we're going through a stage right now of darkness in the culture. For example, I have this quote that runs into it a whole lot. This was during the French Revolution, but I thought it was very interesting because it kind of related to now. It is spiritual bankruptcy, long tolerated, verging now towards economical bankruptcy, and becomes intolerable. From the lowest dumb rank, the inevitable misery, as was predicted, has spread upwards. In every man is some obscure feeling that his position, oppressive or else oppressed, is a false one. All men in one or the other acrid dialect, as assaulters or as defenders, must give vent to the unrest in them. Of such stuff, national well-being and the glory of rulers is not made. So, you get kind of the meaning behind that?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Sense of falseness. And rulers and national well-being, so sort of a sense of higher order. And then another interesting quote, let me try to remember it. Yeah, I was talking about the events of they just murdered a dude in this room on a pike during an initial coup of everything. And it said, people of good justice will be horrified. People of irregular justice will see normal, which I thought was interesting too. In this kind of day and age, we're just seeing a lot of weird stuff go by, and we don't really know how to value it at all.
Right. Because I think, at least if you're looking at it from, there's so many things happening, so many, what do you interpret as a bad thing happening now? You're saying there's kind of a loss of religious take on it, somewhat of a loss of, I guess, empathy to a degree, or of understanding, even if it has to be through a religious lens. It's a lens that we're losing, I guess, that we're not really looking through as often. So people are losing a lot of compassion, but they're gaining it in a way that's maybe not healthy. Mm-hmm. I think it's less about you learning and developing and more about, am I socially accepted? But, even so, religion, a lot of people it is a social acceptance thing. But to many people, it was a way of better interpreting something and understanding it as, what's the word I'm trying to look for? I guess just thinking of it at a higher level, at more of a only thing I can think of is compassion, I guess,
Right, yeah.
Love thy neighbor kind of idea. It might be going away.
Yeah, eye for an eye, not rules.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah. Like there are good lessons to be learned through religion, especially through Christianity, But if you're taught everything as its fact or as a history book, you kind of lose a lot of the meanings of that. And I can see why that was confusing growing up. Mm. It should have been taught more like an English class in a way, being like, here's this story we're going to learn and it's important. It's based on religion, but we need to think about the things it brings to light and how we can become better people, and especially better Christians because of this part of the story. Instead of just being like, this man died in this verse, this chapter. That feels strange to me, hearing that. I didn't know they taught it like that there. That's confusing.
To be the big Christian argument for that these would be the inconsequential effects from actual Christianity, just being a better person, all of this. This is the material world. By seeking faith through everything becomes unveiled, and there's a certain element to it that you can't look at it from a logical perspective, and you have to feel it as you go into it. And all these good things that happen are just effects from it. And if you try to enter it through that material lens, and like, I'm just trying to better myself, it's a big thing that I think most people will fail at, because they're just seeking, as they say, heaven on earth rather than heaven.
So is that seen as a bad thing? Is to use Christianity as a way to better your human life?
Yes, because that also kind of takes on an atheist argument.
Okay.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Because I wouldn't think of it as you are trying to make... It feels a little flawed to me in the idea that I cannot actively take this part of my life and try to improve myself through it, but instead I should...
Well, you aren't doing it because you believe in God and you trust in Him. You're doing it to try to better yourself in the material world.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. You're saying
you can't do that and try to help yourself, and maybe that may push you into it in the beginning. But if you're just trying to seek material gain through it, it will become
right. I think where I'm kind of hitting on two different spots here. I think you were coming at it as you were only going into religion for a selfish reason. I'm saying you can be devoutly Christian, but also see it as a way to... I'm not even saying to gain anything physically. Mm-hmm. I'm saying to mentally be a better person overall, like treat people better, use the lessons that it teaches.
Right. Yeah.
But I know where you're coming from, especially dealing with people at the Potter House. I imagine you actually got to see a lot of that firsthand. people are like, I'm going to be Christian, religious, and it'll make me better, even though they weren't really trying to.
Yeah, it was weaponizing it.
Exactly.
Usually they were the worst people, and you had that early on sobriety.
Right.
So you had a lot, and that was pretty hard to go through. But it's kind of hard to say. A Christian going into that, if you really talk to a monk, I don't know, really devout and stuff, and just trying to say, I'm just trying to better who I am, and because I hated myself with it, they wouldn't be. That would be like a small matter to them. It would be like the love of God, really, that put them through it. Yeah. That sounds kind of cliche, but yeah, that's it. You want to cut?
But
yeah.
Pretty neat stuff going on.
Yeah, so I'm right.
You're right. Thank you for listening, everybody. This was about environmentalism and religion and pharmaceuticals and drugs and the brain. We sure covered a lot of topics today. And next time, we're going to talk about soup.